Okay, welcome back. This is Wayne Madsen with the Wayne Madsen Report, the Saturday Roundup, coming to you live this January 15th from Washington, D.C. And let's go back to the telephones. Edward's been holding on from North Dakota. Edward, are you with us?
Yes. Are you the Madsen that I think I might have seen you on Russian television doing interviews?
Yes, I'm on there every once in a while. Not as often as I used to be, but every once in a while I do some sort of commentary.
Do they actually? I mean, do they actually broadcast out of Russia? I've always wondered.
No, No. The way there are several international news networks that do receive funding from their governments. BBC being one of them. BBC World Service, Canadian Broadcasting, France 24. And RT is basically their English language worldwide news program, news network, I should say. Their worldwide news network, basically what RT does is they have broadcast centers in Moscow, but also in Washington D.C., and they broadcast from Washington, also from New York, and much like Al Jazeera, which has their broadcast headquarters in Doha, Qatar, RT has their broadcast headquarters in Moscow, but also they have broadcast centers in Washington, New York. And the people, by and large, who work in Washington are American citizens.
You're probably familiar with Jeff Gates, I would imagine, right?
I've heard the name, yes.
I asked him a question a few days ago, and I'd sort of like to ask you the same question. It's one that just has sort of got my curiosity going.
Yes.
There's a theory that are you familiar with Nathaniel Kapner at all?
I am not familiar with him. No.
Okay. Well, he has a website called Real Zionist News.
I've seen that website. Yes.
It's a really interesting It's a really interesting website. He's a Jewish person, who has since given up on the whole Jewish Zionist agenda, and he's critical of it. What he thinks, he has several articles on his website where he's saying that, whereas we always thought of sort of this international globalist conspiracy, we sort of associated that with Russia and the Zionism, with sort of the Bolshevism. But what he's saying, which of course is true, but what he's saying is that times have sort of changed now, where under Yeltsin, there were a group of what he calls oligarchs who took over in Russia.
Yes.
They were Jewish.
Absolutely.
And that Yeltsin actually ran them out of the country. He kicked 7 of them out, 5 of them he kicked back to Israel, and a couple of them ended up elsewhere. And what Nathaniel Kapner is saying is that really the seat of Zionism now is really in the United States, and that in fact Yeltsin is an opponent.
You mean Vladimir Putin, Prime Minister Putin?
Yes.
Yes. He's absolutely an opponent, and this whole thing about Hillary Clinton trying to make commentary about Khodorkovsky and his colleague being in jail in Russia for income tax evasion, for fraud, for a number of other things, is all part of this construct. Why doesn't Putin demand Bernie Madoff be released from prison, for example? I mean, why is it that the domestic affairs, and when Putin tries to get these criminals, and as you say, many of them did flee to Britain, the United States, and Israel. They travel around the world, and they are responsible for some of these terror attacks inside Russia.
But do you agree with Kapner's view that essentially now you have Putin working sort of as an opponent to those forces,
Yes.
where in that United
Absolutely.
States, whereas United States is supporting them, the former Soviet Union under Putin is actually opposing them, such that we now have a situation where, back in the 30s and 40s, maybe, the seat of Zionism was in Russia, but that it has now shifted to the United States.
Well, certainly, you can say that Putin is battling against these people. This is why he gets a lot of bad press. And I was recently told by somebody in China that the People's Bank of China is also battling against these same individuals. They do not trust Wall Street and Bernanke, and so we have this odd situation now where whatever freedoms we have left, we may owe them an awful lot what we have left, and being on the same side as with those who are opposed to this international power grab by these international bankers. That puts the American people, the working class person, on the same side as Putin and China. Believe it or not. So isn't that funny how things worked out from the days of the Cold War?
But wouldn't it put the Americans on the opposite side of Putin, though? I don't follow you there.
Oh, no. I mean the American people, the normal American taxpayer that's now being built in Illinois because the taxpayers there have to bail out what that state did, and the taxpayers that are going to have to bail out what California did. No, I mean that puts the American people, the working people, on the same side. No, not the Bernankes, not the Goldman Sachs. The people that run the Obama administration, for example, are almost all Goldman Sachs people.
Right, and you mentioned Sheldon Adelson. I'd like to ask you if I have time. Do I have time to ask you one more question?
Yeah, go ahead. Certainly.
Fidel Castro has, throughout his entire life, always been critical of Israel, but I read an article where, I don't know how long it was ago, but he came out all of a sudden, out of the blue, and said, actually, Israel, everybody should support Israel. They have a right to, quote, defend themselves. And this was a complete turnaround.
I know what you're talking about. You know, he was misquoted by this guy from the Jeffrey Goldberg from the Atlantic that went down there to interview him. Goldberg is one of these Zionist propaganda types. He took words right out of Castro's mouth and misquoted him completely. Later, Castro said he was misquoted. But this is what people like Goldberg get paid to do. These are not reporters; these are propagandists. So that story about Castro saying nice things about Israel was, of course, typical. This is typical when you give an interview to somebody like a Jeffrey Goldberg from the Atlantic.
But the speculation, though, that I heard relating back to what you were saying at the beginning of your show this evening, when you were talking about the days in Cuba where the Jewish gangsters ran the casinos down there.
Yes.
You know, Sheldon Adelson is a huge, he spends many millions of dollars every year to promote Israel, to send kids to youth trips in Israel and supporting Jewish universities, schools and all this sort of thing. And the speculation that I heard, and Adelson's trying to expand his empire, into Macau, China, and all over the world. The speculation that I heard is that Adelson, wants to get in down there. In Cuba stands, the people in charge in Cuba stand to make tons of money if they can strike a deal with Adelson where he can come down there with his casinos, and give Castro and his cohorts a nice cut of the action, and that was the sort of the agreement that was struck behind closed doors between Fidel Castro and Mr. Adelson, that in exchange for Castro's taking a favorable stand toward Adelson's Israel, that Adelson would go down there and open up a bunch of casinos and split the money with the communists down in Cuba.
Yeah.
That was the.
Yes. I think what's more likely to happen, Adelson can't do anything without the approval of those gangsters in Key Biscayne and Miami Beach, and so they are so anti-Castro. I mean, they live and breathe it. They've done it for 50 years now, and I think what we're going to see is if there's any movement, it's going to be on the terms of the Gusano Mafia in southern Florida, and not on any terms from on behalf of the people that are running the show in Havana. So I think Adelson will vote with his country club pals in Palm Beach and Key Biscayne and Miami Beach, and that's going to be the situation. They want to return to the status quo ante Cuba 1959. This is what they want. And the big issue is the property rights. All the land that was expropriated, those Gusanos want that land returned. But you've got problems now because there are foreign hotels that are sitting on some of that beachfront property. So there's going to be some major problems with Cuba. But the people that are running the show in this country, in the United States, are those Gusano Mafia types who are tied in with the Zionist crowd down in Miami Beach. They walk in lockstep. Look at Ileana Ross-Lehtinen, big supporter of the Cuban exile movement, big supporter of Israel, major opponent of the progressive governments in Latin America. And look, those same governments are now recognizing Palestine one after another. So you can see how this is all playing out in southern Florida politics.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks for calling in from North Dakota. And let's go back to the phones. Dave has been holding on from Massachusetts. Dave, are you with us?
I'm with you, Wayne. I think this is the first time. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Wayne. I think this is the first time I've ever talked to you. I've listened to you quite a bit. I always enjoy your show. Hey, with this Lochner character,
yes.
Wayne, do you know that he just bought that Glock 9 on November 30th? Well, that's almost December, Wayne. In other words,
right.
And there's no record of him taking any target practice at any of the firing ranges, shooting ranges around Tucson or anything. But you know, Wayne, he did some pretty fancy shooting within a month's time. When the shooting breaks out, Wayne, as you can well imagine, as soon as the first shots are fired, everybody starts running and ducking behind things. And,
right. And there's always and let me bring this up. There's always an initial report of another person who's being they're always looking for a second person in these things. We had it here with the Pentagon shooting at the Pentagon Metro. We had it with the shooting at the Holocaust Museum here. There were always initial reports of another person, and then when they usually get that other person, they say, "Oh, well, we interviewed that person, and that person had nothing to do with it."
Yeah. Some expert marksman hit all those targets because these people aren't standing up saying shoot me. They're all ducking. They're hitting the deck. They're biting the dust. They're crouching behind things. That's some pretty doggone fancy shooting for a fellow that just bought his Glock 9 on.
Exactly right. It's like we had the same report out of Virginia Tech. There were initially reports of 2 shooters down there on that campus. And of course, this guy Chu, he was another one of these novices that had just started practicing with these semi-automatics that he had just procured. So yes, we see this. You're right, absolutely right. It's time and time again, and always there's this initial report of another person, and then we're told forget about it. They interviewed that person. And there's nothing to it. Well, is that really the case here? Did he have somebody controlling him? I would note that there's a report now that Lochner had a picture taken of him. He's holding this 9mm handgun while wearing a red G-string. Okay, so I mean, this guy wasn't. He was no shrinking violet. He was out there letting everybody know, hey, I'm nuts, and I'm crazy. And I tried to join the Army, and even they rejected me. But yeah, I think there's a lot more we don't know about this character.
Yeah. So, hey, and now another thing, Wayne, I'd like to bring to your attention. I believe that our sheriff here, right in my county, Middlesex County in Massachusetts, he was right after Thanksgiving. He was suicided. Of course, from day one, the papers reported that he committed suicide. They, go right along with the big lie, before there was any autopsy or coroner's report or anything. But James V. DePola. They're trying to abolish all the sheriffs in Massachusetts and put them under the Department of Correction, Wayne, and they've succeeded. But there were a couple of tough old bird holdouts, and Sheriff Jim DePola was one of them. He wouldn't go quietly, but they found his body up in Maine on the coast and everything, and they said he committed suicide and everything.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
If you want to look into it, Wayne, James V. DePola, the Middlesex County Sheriff.
Well, we've had a couple of... Yes, thanks for letting me know about him. And we've had a couple of strange deaths in the Washington area as well. As you know, we have this man, Jack Wheeler, former assistant to the Air Force Secretary, being found in a landfill in Wilmington, Delaware. And then just this past week, we had the wife of... President Obama's liaison to the House of Representatives, herself a former chief of staff to Rosa DeLauro, the congresswoman from Connecticut, goes out to get in her car to go to work, apparently turns on the ignition, the car catches on fire, and she's burned to death in her own car. And of course, we're told about that was a tragic, freaky accident, and with Wheeler that he may have been disoriented and somehow crawled into a dumpster and died that way. So this is what they're trying to have us believe.
Yeah, what was I going to say with the polar there? What the heck was I just going to say? Wayne, we got Sheriff Richard Mack's book to Jim DePola. About when it first came out about a year ago. Sheriff Richard Mack's book, and Jim DePola was really responding to that information and everything too. And he wasn't going to go quietly. And we got one other tough sheriff in Massachusetts, Hodgson, down in Bristol County, but he's not like Jim DePola. He's not going quietly either. But he's like one of these neocons.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, listen. Well, thanks for telling us about that sheriff. Yes, there are many strange deaths going on, and we'll get to the bottom of them. It's the last thing we do, and we'll be right back after this short break.